5th of July, and this is going to be the last English broadcast until next month, September, the last Tuesday in September. So if you're listening out there and you'd like to hear some more, you're going to have to wait. I've got the chat room open just in case you're listening. If you'd like to tune in and listen to what I have to say. I've been conducting this online broadcast for about 2 to 3 years, and just recently decided to start one in English. The most of the non-Japanese listeners are not aware of my presence in the Japanese public, Japanese society. So I'm just another one of those guys on YouTube that are trying to give you some advice on what to do. So, by way of a short introduction, I've been in Japan for a little over 50 years, most of that time in the fitness industry, and from just about every facet of the industry, from equipment sales to planning fitness centers to operating to managing, the entire gamut of everything involved with the industry. My focus has always been on education. Before you can persuade somebody to embark on a program of exercise, I think they have to have an idea of exactly what they're about to encounter and the value of that. Exercise for many people is not a lot of fun, and there are risks, which is one of the reasons why I started this broadcast. There are a myriad of broadcasts out there, and some very, very respectable people doing very, very informative broadcasts. It is not that the internet has a lack of information. In fact, it's just the opposite. Usually it's too much information. It's whether that information is appropriate to your situation or not. That usually requires some give and take in terms of asking questions. Hopefully I can reply to whatever inquiries you might have. If not, I can refer you perhaps to somebody who does have that information. So, considering it is now the end of July, and it's getting pretty warm out there, 37 degrees today, which is a little bit tough to take if you're outside. If you're in an air conditioning building, it's easier, certainly. For those of you who are planning to do anything outside in this weather, let me start by cautioning you. The body tries to achieve a balance in several areas. The balance between blood sugar is a balancing act between the liver and the secretion of insulin by the pancreas. So the pancreas strives to reduce blood sugar before it gets too high, and the liver strives to raise blood sugar to give you energy. So there's a balancing act. This is called homeostasis, for those of you who wish to know. It's the same way with maintaining a certain level of body temperature. Too high, you run into problems. Too low, you run into problems. So the body strives to accommodate the conditions that you are living in, whether extreme cold or extreme heat. That's not usually a problem until you do something that is counter indicated, meaning that running outside in 37 degree with 65% humidity is just not generally recommended for those of you who are interested. So to give you a brief background, how does the body control heat? Well, the organ of the body that controls a lot of the functions in the body, not just heat, is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the lower part of the brain, basically just at the top of the vertebrae that supports the skull. It's the lower part. More about that later. So the hypothalamus controls the body's reaction to extreme temperatures. So if extreme's cold, the hypothalamus triggers the brain triggers the nerves to begin shivering. Shivering begins to contract the muscles and generates heat. So that's one way that the body compensates for extreme cold. Extreme heat is a little bit more complicated. When your body begins to get warm, it begins to get warm at the blood that is closest to the bones in your body. So your blood will become superheated. That the blood that is close to the bones in your body will become superheated. And then so the hypothalamus takes a look at that and said, well, we have to get that superheated blood someplace where it can be cold. So it essentially raises your blood your blood pressure and your heart stroke volume. So your pulse rate increases, your blood pressure increases, and that forces the superheated blood to the surface of just under the skin. Then sweat is triggered, so you begin to sweat. The sweat evaporates, it cools the skin and the blood, the superheated blood that is just under the skin, and then that blood is again recirculated, and that it's an ongoing process. As long as the body needs to be cooled off, that process continues, and that's all fine, and it works. It works pretty well, actually. The hypothalamus is pretty accurate, and it senses when the blood is cooled, and when the body does no longer need to be cooled, it will lower your blood pressure and reduce your pulse rate, and that's all good. Except when your sweat does not evaporate, and that's where humidity plays a significant role. So the guidelines of exercise outside or playing any kind of athletic games outside is if the temperature is over 30 degrees centigrade and the humidity is over 60%, then that's a dangerous environment to exert yourself. So, but if you choose to do that, your blood pressure will increase, and your heart rate will increase, and the body will not cool the blood, and you will get into serious trouble. So what the body does in that case is says, well, if you're not willingly going to stop doing what you're doing and you continue to work in very hot, humid conditions, we're just going to make you pass out. And that's what happens. You lose consciousness. Not a good idea. If you're on a playing field in a contact sport, say rugby or soccer, that can have serious consequences. So you don't want to do that. And that's regardless of age. But very young and very old people are extremely susceptible to that. In your 20s, 30s, perhaps even 40s, if you're active, then you've developed the cardiovascular efficiency to the level where your body can compensate for a certain level of heat and humidity. It'll not compensate for that easily, but you can do it. And you probably won't run into too much trouble. That's, of course, providing you are adequately, that you've taken enough water. And just as a interesting way to alleviate the effects of overheating, if you fool the hypothalamus into thinking that your body is cool enough, then it will lower your blood pressure and reduce your pulse rate. And you do that not by drinking ice water or ice liquid of any kind, but putting that cold container at the back of your neck, just below the base of your skull, where the hypothalamus is located. And now the hypothalamus thinks, well, the body's cooling off now, so we can lower your blood pressure and lower your heart rate, and you will begin to feel better very quickly. If you do not do that, then you will probably pass out. Hopefully you don't continue until you get some serious problems. And then you're talking about, well, most of you know, if you've listened to past episodes, what high blood pressure can do to you, even a young person. Strokes, heart attacks. It's that kind of thing that you're fooling around with. So you have to be cautious. So, in that regard, there are different body types that respond differently to this heat, this thermal regulation mechanism that goes on in your body. People who have a lot of a certain amount of adipose tissue, fat. So, and it's not the fat around your stomach. It's the fat under your arms, on your shoulders, in your neck, areas that are exposed to the elements. If you are outside in a very hot, humid environment, and you continue to exert yourself, and the hypothalamus takes charge and starts raising your blood sugar, blood pressure, and raising your heart stroke volume, and raising your heart rate, in the hopes that the sweat will evaporate and cool your blood, that's fine. But if there is fat underneath the skin where the sweat is supposed to evaporate, then the superheated blood never gets the effect of the evaporated sweat. And that's the problem with people who are heavy, who have adipose tissue, not just around their stomach, but around areas where there is a large musculature, legs, arms, shoulders, back. If you are lean, then the evaporated sweat will cool that blood and you'll be fine. But if you are not, you will potentially have serious problems. So, that's how the body works. Keep that in mind. Of course, keep hydrated, especially during this hot weather. I think 1.5 to 2.5 liters of liquid a day, preferably water. Sports drinks are basically diluted sugar. If you are involved in perhaps a long-term athletic pursuit like a marathon, half marathon, then sports drinks are fine because you need the sugar to raise your blood sugar to keep your energy levels high. That's okay. But if you're not, if you're, for example, out in the garden and you're working in the garden and it's hot and sweating and you've got gardening clothes on and all of a sudden you start to feel faint, that's the time to reach for a cold bottle of, doesn't matter what the liquid is. It's not the liquid, it's the bottle that's cold. Put that cold bottle on your hypothalamus and you'll begin to feel better. At that point, get inside, turn on the air conditioner. If you don't have an air conditioner or you're reluctant, like some people are, reluctant to use the air conditioning, put cold water in your bathtub and sit in the cold water until your body temperature approaches a more normal rate. These are just suggestions. If you're outside exercising in the heat, you should be wearing very cool, loose-fitting clothes to allow the breeze, if there is one, to travel through the clothing and assist in the evaporation of the sweat so your body will cool down. I still see people who, either inside or outside, continue to wear these rubberized sweatsuits, which is, in my estimation, simply insane. It's just, you are disrupting the body's mechanism to cool. You are disrupting the body's mechanism to compensate for the heat with evaporated sweat, and you are setting yourself up for serious risks. We get this when we see athletes. I suppose the athletic pursuit that comes to mind is boxing, professional boxers. So the professional boxers usually have a weight class that they are registered to enter. If they do not make that weight, they have to lose weight very, very quickly. So the best way to do that, in terms of weight loss, is dehydration. So I'm sure if you have children, or if you're listening to this and you're 16, 17, and you have, for example, and you're pursuing an athletic pursuit that requires to be a certain weight by a certain time, and you find you can't do it, then you might consider entering a sauna to lose the water in your body and drop, after 30 minutes in the sauna, you've dropped a kilo of weight. Now don't make the mistake that everybody does. If I sit in the sauna, I'm going to lose weight. If you sit in the sauna, you're going to lose water weight that is not fatty weight. Now if you're in this set of circumstances and you have a weight class you must meet within a certain time and you're over that, okay, there are other things you can do. You can exercise more, you can limit your diet, especially when it comes down to carbohydrates. You can consider eating normally, except for the carbohydrates, protein, to maintain your energy levels. But to be perfectly honest, you should have thought of this 3 months prior to the scheduled contest, and you should have adjusted your weight prior to the contest so that the contest day you made the weight easily. Unfortunately, other people are not like that. They assume they can drop weight quickly, so they go through the dehydration process. I will stress this, as I've stressed in weight loss seminars: when you lose water weight, that is not fatty weight, that is not caloric expenditure, that is loss of water, period. You need the water. You need the water. You need to hydrate. Okay. And as I said before, if you're in a long-term athletic pursuit like marathon running, you'll also need the sugar that in athletic drinks. But if you're just overheated and you want to cool the body as soon as possible, in addition to cooling a cold can or bottle against the hypothalamus, if you drink cold water, ice water, they've done some studies and they refer to how quickly does the liquid that you drink disseminate into the body where it's needed, and that's called gastric emptying. And they did several different studies. They did tea, coffee, fruit juices, sports drinks, and the fastest, most efficient one was ice water. Now, if you're in the middle of an athletic pursuit, you can't guzzle a liter of water, because then that stays in your stomach. Even though the gastric emptying is occurring, it still takes a little bit of time. So when you drink a lot of water, what that does is stays in the stomach sac for a few moments or a few minutes. If you continue to exercise, that pulls on the diaphragm, and then you get what they call a side stitch. And that's the same thing if you had a heavy meal before your exercise or before your athletic pursuit. You'll get that side stitch. It pulls on the diaphragm spasms, and you get this pain in your side, which is very difficult to alleviate. In the moment. Long term, if you're more cautious about the amount of food and liquid you take in, that will take care of it. But let's get back to thermoregulation for a moment. So, if you are exercising or playing an athletic pursuit in a controlled environment where the temperature is controlled, and the humidity is controlled and the temperature is not too high, you're all right. Now, for general training, that temperature guideline is for aerobic conditioning between 20 and 22 degrees centigrade, and for resistance training between around 26 degrees, a little bit warmer, and that will stimulate a little bit better growth hormones, and so you will be more efficient in what you are pursuing. Passive exercise like yoga, stretching, a higher temperature between 28 and 30. Again, dry, reduce the humidity if possible, and that should be fine. That promotes the muscles become more relaxed, more fluid, and your stretching will be facilitated. So in a controlled environment, if you can do that, that's the ideal. Most training facilities do not have separate rooms for each of those endeavors. They don't have a separate cardiovascular room, aerobic room. They don't have a separate weight training room nor a separate yoga room. They have studios, but those are usually occupied. So it's not easy to do that. I'm just trying to give you the physiological guidelines. Whether they can be achieved or not is something you have to decide or find on your own. So that's that. So essentially, in terms of thermoregulation, those are the things you have to be aware of primarily. Clothing outside, again, loose-fitting clothing. Avoid sweatsuits or rubber suits that prevent the sweat from evaporating and interfere with the body's cooling process. And if you do start to feel bad, keep in mind the hypothalamus is the key. It is not only drinking water. Of course you're going to be hydrated. I mean, that's nowadays it's a given. Hydration with water or sports drinks. Sure, high calories in the sports drinks, a lot of sugar, but you do get the fluid. And that's important, that you stay hydrated. The food that you drink will promote retention of those fluids. Carbohydrates. It used to be, before carbohydrates became the bad guys in terms of weight gain, more about that later, it used to be 60% of your diet should be carbohydrate. Hopefully not super refined carbohydrate. Rice, potatoes, those kinds of things. That's fine. That's fine. Starches, it'll give you all the energy you need. You need the energy. You need the glycogen in the muscle. You need the glycogen in the liver. These are stored energy. You have to fund the consumption of ATP in the cells, and that's done with glycogen, and glycogen is created with carbohydrate. So that's been covered in previous episodes. So that's a given. So you need the carbohydrate. The other function of carbohydrate, it helps to retain fluid, which is one of the reasons why they suggest that athletes maintain 60% of their diet consume 60% of the diet being consumed with carbohydrates. 25% protein, 15% fats. I mean, those are just general dietary guidelines. That's coming under a lot of scrutiny recently, especially with the worldwide, if you want to call it an epidemic, of obesity. Well, obesity there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. And basically it's overconsumption of refined foods. Sugars primarily, certainly unisaccharides, disaccharides, as opposed to polysaccharides, which are your starches, which athletes should consume. It's the unisaccharides, which is in sugar, refined sugar, which is used as a preservative. And way back, 60 years ago, because corn syrup was cheaper, they decided to replace sugar with corn syrup. And corn syrup is not easily broken down in the body and tends to be stored. And with the onset of a great deal of corn syrup in processed foods to prevent them from spoiling, obesity levels shot up. And consequently, heart problems and all kinds of afflictions that were associated with being overweight. In terms, to reiterate, with thermoregulation, fat interferes with the body's ability to cool the blood. It's just a barrier. It's like wearing a blanket underneath your skin. So the evaporation never gets to the point where it's utilized adequately. So that's kind of the whole story. Drink plenty of water, dress lightly. When it is over 30 degrees and over 60% humidity, and you think of exercise, my suggestion is simple. Don't exercise in this kind of temperature. There is one caveat. if you anticipate hot weather arriving several months from whenever you are involved in exercise. Suppose, for example, it was now April, and you knew that in the end of July or middle of July it's going to get very warm and very humid. Humid in June, especially with Japan with the rainy season, absolutely. In July it's probably going to get warm and humid just because it's July. What can I say? And in August it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. So what you could do, if you have a mind to do this, you could enhance the body's defense mechanism. And the way that is done is you can, number one, teach the body how to sweat. And that may sound strange, but some people do not sweat readily. Okay? The body has not learned, hey, I need the cooling here. And so when it comes time to sweat, they have difficulty with that. So the solution to that is start early. About 2 or 3 months prior to the hot, humid weather ensuing, exercise aerobically primarily to build up the capillary beds. And the capillary beds have built up sufficiently, they will facilitate cooling the blood. Okay? And they will compensate for the hypothalamus's direction to raise the blood sugar. Okay? I'm sorry. Blood pressure. Okay? So if you have only a few capillary beds, then the blood pressure goes up because those few capillary beds have to compensate for all the heat that you're encountering. If you have developed a great many capillary beds, which are primarily developed with long, slow distance bicycling or running or walking, at about 70% of your age-related target heart rate, then by the time the hot weather arrives, you have acclimatized. Not totally, but it will take you very little time to fully acclimatize to the hot, humid weather. The other thing that you might want to contemplate, if you have, of course, weight loss is a given, but we all should pay more attention to that. If you have a heavy upper body musculature and you're involved in an aerobic activity, keep in mind that a heavy musculature in your upper body doesn't serve a great deal of purpose. Because now what you've done is you've added an extra burden to the heart. Not only does the heart have to pump blood with its nutrients and with its oxygen to the muscles that are working, it also has to pump blood to the upper body where the muscles are not necessarily working, certainly not to the degree that the legs are. So, if you have a large upper body mass, that you're going to create an extra burden on the heart. Now, I can testify to this because I used to, believe it or not, run marathons. And the Honolulu Marathon in particular, I would train 20 or 30 people every year. And we would run in all kinds of weather. And I created the program for each and every one because each person was different. Some were heavy, some were light, some were fast twitch muscle fibers, some were slow twitch, some were geared towards marathon running, some weren't. So we would all train together for actually almost the entire year. Of course, closer to the marathon, we'd pick up the time and the distances that we traveled on our sometimes daily run, but at least every other day. So, since people told me that I would never be able to finish a full marathon because of my upper body mass, because I wasn't a marathon runner. I wasn't. A casual runner, sure. But primarily I was weightlifter, power lifter, and so running was something that I just did not enjoy. So prior to the marathon, after reading about all the things you had to do to get yourself in condition for a marathon, and it wasn't just running, it was nutrition, it was sleep, it was a whole bunch of things. But I started to reduce the amount of upper body resistance training that I was doing. So my body went from 105 kilos down to about 90. Still heavy, certainly by marathon runner's standard. Still heavy, but upper body mass was much reduced. And so as a result, I was able to complete 42 kilometers. Not easily and not quickly, but I was able to do it. I had friends of mine who did not choose to do that. And basically they were bodybuilders. And they carried a huge amount of upper body mass. And they never made it to the finish line. I mean, they would have to stop and retire after about 20, 25 kilometers. The burden on the heart was just too much. They were just too fatigued. Couldn't do it. So, keep in mind, the training is important. Primarily, aerobic conditioning will facilitate the development of capillary beds that will facilitate the blood flow to the surface, the undersurface of the skin. Sweat evaporates, cools the blood, and that circulation continues, and eventually the body will begin to compensate if you're out in the heat doing something foolish like running around in 35 degrees or 37 degrees with 80% humidity, which is simply insane. It's not insane. I understand people have different objectives. They feel motivated by a certain level of accomplishment. But in any kind of training, there are certain guidelines. The three major guidelines are effective, efficient, safe are the primary three, and provision for continuity. But many people, in their eagerness to create their ultimate physical being, ignore the safety factors. I did it with powerlifting. I did some insane things, and now as you get older, you pay the price. But I didn't die. And one of the things I did not do was run outside in this kind of weather. So, some people think that running inside will condition them for running outside. Yes and no. The cardiovascular effect inside on a treadmill is the same, but it's very, very different outside. The muscular conditioning is very, very different. So if you're running inside to develop capillary beds to help you compensate for the heat, that's fine. But if you're running inside and you're looking at a marathon, I think you will find that that is not the correct approach to your aerobic conditioning. So I think there you have it. Basically, that's thermoregulation. That's how it works. Combination of nervous system, hypothalamus, tells the heart to pump more blood, pumps more blood, sends the surface of the skin, you sweat, evaporates, blood cools, you're all right. Keep that simple tip in mind. If you're outside for any reason in this heat and you're starting to feel poorly, get inside to either air conditioning or take a cold shower. If you can't do that, find a cold bottle of beer or Coca-Cola or anything, doesn't matter. Forget about the health benefits. Put that ice cold bottle on the back of your neck and you will survive. Last year, a friend of mine was outside taking pictures and she felt very, very sick. And she walked inside and she was on the verge of getting, I thought, pretty 36. So I dashed off and grabbed a rag and found some ice and put in the rag and wet the rag and put it in the back of her neck. In about 5 minutes, she was back normal. It is dramatic in terms of the returning to a normal state. And do not ignore it. Do not ignore it. Do not play golf in this heat. Do not go outside. Don't go in the garden in this. Try and stay out of it if you can. If you want to go out and sit by the pool, that's fine. It's passive. Just be sure you don't get overexposed. Cool yourself off on a regular basis and drink plenty of water. And you'll be fine. And that's thermoregulation. So, I'm going to stop the broadcast tonight. I don't know how many people are listening to this or even appreciate this broadcast in English. I will continue it, but it's only going to be once a month unless people write in and say, listen, I'd like to hear more of this. Right now, it's on the last Tuesday of every month. You can access chuckwilson.co.jp, the homepage, and look at Kenko Dojo, and you can access this broadcast. I try to provide you with all the information that I've been able to learn over the past, wow, I hate to say it, 60 years or so. To the best of my knowledge, it is accurate, but it may not apply to you particularly. But this base of knowledge is something we all should have, just to learn how the body works, how it compensates for extreme situations, and what to do when when that compensatory mechanism sets in, and how to ameliorate how that mechanism takes hold of you. It'll kill you. It'll kill you, and it has already this year. Several older people have succumbed to heat prostration, and very young children, and very old. Well, I'm one of those. When you're over 70, your ability to compensate for extreme heat, extreme cold, diminishes significantly. So be aware of this. And if you're not in good physical condition, you quite possibly can succumb. So take care of yourself. Stay healthy. I would suggest you get a lot of exercise, but and I think in terms of exercise, I think if you were involved in athletic pursuit, casual, even golf, tennis, that alone is better than nothing. So I wish you all the luck in the world, and I hope to see you at the end of September, the last Tuesday at 7:30 in the evening. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good day and stay well. Bye-bye.